as for the position of assistant clerk magistrate.
You want to stop?
Counselor Gibbonville, if you can just pause. I think the Lieutenant Governor is joining us for the assembly now.
Yes, so as I indicated, we're going to suspend the hearing so that we can meet with the Lieutenant Governor for the assembly. I'm going to indicate that we'll try and go back, it's 12:04, we'll try and go back in session at 12:20. Good morning, Lieutenant Governor.
Good morning, Councilor Hurley, members of the Governor's Council.
Good morning, Governor.
Good morning.
Okay, we may begin the assembly this week. I would call upon Councilor Iannella for our prayer and pledge today.
Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. We come to you this hour asking for your blessing and help as we are gathered together. We pray for guidance in the matters at hand and ask that you would clearly show us how to conduct our work with a spirit of joy and enthusiasm. Give us the desire to find ways to excel in our work. Help us to work together and encourage each other to excellence. We ask that we would challenge each other to reach higher and farther to the best we can be. We ask this in the name of the Lord. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I call upon Councilor Kennedy for a motion to record advice and consent for the financial warrant.
So moved, Governor.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Right.
Aye.
I recognize Councilor Duff for a motion to record advice and consent for the pending list of notaries public and justices of the peace.
So moved, Governor.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 I recognize Councilor Iannella for a motion to record advice and consent for the appointment of Robert W. Harnais to the position of Associate Justice of the District Court.
Thank you. I make a motion that we approve Robert Harnais to the District Court, Judge of the District Court.
Second.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Governor.
There's a second?
Second. Second.
Yes, Councilor Devaney.
Thank you. First of all, I say this with regret because he's a nice man, but I made a pledge when I first got on the council that I would not have anyone buy their way in, and unfortunately, I don't know how much, hundreds and thousands of contributions that this man has given, and he didn't have to. He was qualified. But, I made a pledge, and I also have an addition into the governor's statement to all nominees, and that prohibits anyone who is applying for a judgeship to give money to the governor, lieutenant governor, and it reads also governor's counselors. And I did that because people know in the past there were counselors that went to prison selling judgeships. And I feel very strongly that we should not be, shouldn't be based on pages of contributions. And so one of the things that greatly concerned me was that the nominee, besides giving all this money to lieutenant governor and governor, that after the, after the deadline of giving contributions, his wife gave a number of contributions, but one in particular that concerns me is the, well, actually it's $1,500, $1,500 to the lieutenant governor. And I don't want this to be, out there that we're not concerned about these things, and that we want people to come before us with the merits of their work. And this man didn't have to do it. He had the qualifications. So, that's a lot of money. These are 1,500 a pop. So I can't in all justice do this. That's why I went to Governor Romney, and he put that into the application that the nominee here has seen today. And I think it's very important to take the money out of it. And so, unfortunately, I am not going to be able to vote for this person because I live by that we don't buy our way in here. And he even gave to a sitting councilor here a couple of years ago who will be voting. So I just don't want that equation to be in here. Those days are gone. And I don't want this to be, I don't want this to be out there for people to say, gee, if you give a lot of money to everyone, you're going to get a judgeship. So with that, that's my reason for voting no. And I don't do it with joy. But it's wrong and it has to stop. And we have to this council has to show that we are not going to vote people with pages and pages of contributions. It's wrong. And I did ask you, Lieutenant Governor, if you would return that money to the nominee's wife, because the money that she gave was after he was interviewed, after the JNC approved him, and it was on the governor's desk. This is not the way I want my government to work, okay? And it's wrong. So I will be voting no.
Okay. No contributions were made in violation of the governor's executive order. Anyone else like to be heard? Okay, we have a motion and a second. We may begin the roll call.
Counselor Ferreira,
Yes.
Counselor Jubenville,
Yes.
Counselor Devaney,
No.
Counselor Ianella,
Yes.
Counselor Duff,
Yes.
Counselor Kennedy,
Yes.
Counselor Hurley. 6-1, Governor.
Thank you. I recognize Councilor Duff for motion record advice and consent for the appointment of Susan H. McNeil to the position of Associate Justice of the Lawrence District Court.
Thank you, Governor. With great pleasure, I make that nomination.
Second.
There's a motion and a second? Yes, Councilor Devaney.
Thank you. First of all, I don't find pleasure in opposing a nominee, but unfortunately, sometimes it requires it. And this is, remind me, I hope I have the right one that we only have 2 today that we're voting on, isn't that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. So first of all, I want to say that this was the most horrendous thing that I have ever seen, a case that this nominee had. I cried, I lost sleep over it. Okay? And so I wanted just to remind people what this was about. On November 20th, 2015, a 2-year-old girl was kidnapped from her home in the middle of the night. She was tortured, burnt, cut, assaulted, and left naked on the side of a road to die in the freezing cold. Thank God, 2 good Samaritans found her, and first responders arrived. If she hadn't been found, this would have been a murder case. This precious child would have frozen to death. So, as I said, she was burnt all over her body, even removing her diapers to burn her in private parts. Her hair was all cut off, left with cuts, with blood all over her head. This precious little girl is 7 years old now, and she always relives that nightmare. She will never get over the torture, the cruelty for the rest of her life. She was left to die naked in the cold on a street by Abigail Hannah. She still is afraid to put on her socks. She looks at the scars that cover her body, and it's always a reminder. Abigail Hannah was hired as a babysitter. When she didn't show up the second time, they fired her. Attorney Susan McNeil defended Abigail Hannah, and rightfully so. That's her job. And this is, this is not about the position that she has. It's the position that she took defending this person. First of all, everyone needs to be defended. I mean, even the horror of the horrible thing that happened with the in the I'm sorry, I'm filled. I'm not myself today. I'm not really feeling that great, but I know that this person didn't. This little girl deserved more justice. So what happened was Susan McNeil defended Abigail Hannah, and rightfully so. Everyone should be defended, and she has that right. And Attorney McNeil has that right to do her job. She recommended a sentence of 3 years. This is the nominee before us. 3 years for a monster who nearly killed a 2-year-old child. Abigail Hannah has gone before the parole board twice in 2 years. It was learned that this beautiful 2-year-old was not her only victim. They refused her parole. They said that her condition of schizophrenia did not raise to the level of what she did to this child, that many have the same. So she recommended a sentence of 3 years. And the judge, looking at the sentence, is that was, first of all, there was no reason for this short sentence. She could have given her more. And the judge, going by, the regulations, and these councils that I serve with have opposed that law. And the thing is that, when you go into the details of this hearing, it is so, for anyone, I've had 4 children that were 2 years old, and I can't even imagine. And the thing is that I heard that in this case, and I heard the nominee, she came before us, and she was very proud of her actions, and she said that was, really what should have happened. And the judge gave her a sentence that she thought was appropriate. And so then, as I said, this precious little girl will have that nightmare for the rest of her life. And so, so the thing is, as the only counselor who responded to the victim parents, we all got notified, all the counselors, from the parents of this poor child. I was the only one that responded. I talked with the father, heartbreaking. And I didn't make up these things. And one of the counselors asked the nominee if what I said was factual. I do my homework. I'm proud of the time I work. I'm the only full-time up here. And this was so heartbreaking. I couldn't sleep after I talked with the father. Yet when this nominee came before us, she didn't have any feeling she did the right thing. And she went by the standards. But you know what? This woman went before the parole board twice, and twice they rejected her. And the nominee, when I questioned, she said that this woman had schizophrenia. Well, the parole board said there are others that have this symptom and they do not torture or children. And so they had rejected her twice. So there is a rule that for good behavior, you can get time off on your sentence. So because of that, this woman is going to be out. She's going to be out in April. Now, the thing is that this father went to the governor and he didn't see him. He didn't talk with him twice. Can you imagine the parents, how they feel that now the perpetrator who did all these horrible things to their daughter couldn't even be heard, and she's going to be a judge? And the thing is that it was talked on here that, they went by the book, and it really isn't in fact necessary to give that sentence. But anyway, the thing that I want to say is that the parents were reaching out to the council. I'm glad I reached back. And they couldn't come to the hearing. They don't want publicity for their daughter. She's gone through a lot, and they don't want this all over the papers and everything. I'm not even giving the name here. And that's a sad thing, because they reached out to us, and I responded. I know I don't have much clout. I know I don't. And what they want to do is to tell the governor how wrong the system is. First of all, which was so incredible, that the Department of Corrections had approved a move to a minimum security facility for this person and eligible to be out in community work. Imagine the victims. They had to educate the Department of Corrections about Abigail Hanna having sex offender status. She has sex offender status. And so with that information, they didn't allow her to be moved. So this couple is trying to make the system better. They don't want this to happen to any other child. And they don't want someone representing a person and challenging that, she did the right thing.
She did.
And according to the level that was reported, the medical records, does not necessitate this. The description of what happened and does not necessitate that. And so she's a sexual offender, and the 2-year-old's father contacted, as I said, the governor. He has been so involved making things right. They are even involved in the they have a march for children exploited, and they're doing everything they can, and they want to talk to the governor, and they have been rejected. And I'm asking now for the governor to talk to them. Their life will never be the same. Their child will never be the same. And, you know, and this was a monster who nearly killed a 2-year-old child. And she's getting all the treatment that she deserves. And the council all thought was wonderful, and they praised the nominee for all that she has done for the criminal. And I think every criminal has a right to be rehabilitated. But what about this family? Where's the justice for them? That they couldn't even talk to the governor? And the thing is that they have all the documentation about this woman who has sexually attacked children, and yet this never came to pass. And the nominee, you know, when I brought this up, one of my colleagues said, "Is it true what Councilor Devaney is saying?" And she said, she tried to whitewash it and twist it around.
Is there a point?
But I just want to say that I am voting no, and I've never felt stronger for a level 3 sex offender and what this child will go through her life and her family for what she did. So the justice didn't meet the crime, and she will be out in a few months, and this child will have all those scars for what she did, cigarette burns and everything else. So I'm sorry that I have to be so dramatic about it, but it as a mother of 4 children and grandchildren, I pray for this girl. I pray for her. And she had no remorse. She was so proud of what she did when she was before us, this nominee. And I'm not proud. I'm not proud of what she did. And
Okay.
I will be voting no.
Okay, thank you, Counselor. I assure you that the Executive Office of Public Safety has met with the family and will continue to work with them and be available to them.
I hope so.
We have a motion and a
Lieutenant Governor,
second.
may I say
Is there
something?
anyone else who would like to be heard? Counselor
I do.
Anella. No, Counselor Jubenville.
Thank you. Well, I heard the argument about this lady that my colleague from Watertown had during the hearing. I hear her comments today. And what I take from them is that everybody has a right to a lawyer as long as a lawyer does something that she agrees with. And I can't stress enough how bad this crime was. It was a terrible crime, and I read what the parents wrote, and it's their hurt is palpable, and I feel for them every day. It's a terrible thing they went through. I have 2 daughters, and I would feel the same way if it happened to one of mine. But we live in a country that has probably the greatest judicial system in the world, and one of the reasons it is so great is because we have the presumption of innocence law that says everybody's presumed innocent, no matter what they're accused of, until they either plead guilty or a jury finds them guilty. The other thing about our country that makes us so great is that everybody in our system that's charged with a crime where they could be incarcerated has a right to an attorney. The very famous case of Gideon versus Wainwright, 1963 case, where Mr. Gideon was tried without a lawyer, even though he begged for one. He was in Florida. And the judge said that he wasn't going to give him a lawyer. He didn't give him one. Mr. Gideon was found guilty and sentenced to 5 years in state prison. His case made its way to the Supreme Court, and on March 18th of 63, Justice Black issued the decision. Other justices chimed in. But basically, the long and short of it is they said, from now on in this country, every single person in every state that is charged with a crime where incarceration is possible will be given an attorney. The state will supply an attorney for every citizen so accused. When this decision came out, immediately over 2,000 people were released from prison in Florida alone. Thousands were released throughout the country for the same thing. So any good defense lawyer, any defense lawyer that works and takes cases, they get cases sometimes that are horrible, terrible. You wonder how a human being can treat other human beings that way. And if we go back in time, just in this Commonwealth, and we add up and bring in the cases of every human being that committed an atrocious crime, it would the files would probably fill this room. So even though she represented her and she did her best, that's what her job was. That's what she was there for. That's the oath she took as an attorney. And the judge who made the sentence after the lawyers and the DAs had their say and requested for the judge, I think the Commonwealth requested 10 years in that case, and this nominee requested 3 to 5. Judge Tom Dreschler, who has had many years as a criminal attorney before he was on the bench, decided the case called for a 5 to 7 state prison. So I guess we can blame him too, because he's the one that put the final sentence in effect. I'm not concerned with what the parole office did or Department of Corrections. They do what they do. The fact of the matter is, and the issue here for this nominee is whether or not she's qualified to be a judge. You know, when a judge gets a case like this and it goes to a jury, he will explain to the jury and order the jury and not try this case on emotions. You've got to separate yourself as a juror from these terrible emotions you might have. You got to leave them outside the courtroom. But to me, a lawyer that takes a case like this, and I didn't see, I hear the statement from my sister counselor and from others in the court, so-and-so didn't show remorse. I don't know what that means in our court system. I've been 15 times, maybe 16,000 times in front of judges in my career. And I've heard that complaint. The defendant isn't showing any emotion. He's not showing any remorse. Most of the time, I tell a defendant not to show any emotion, because there's people in the courtroom on both sides, and they can get riled up and involved in it. This is a woman who, for all intents and purposes, probably indicated this crime was a terrible crime. Who would be in favor of this crime? Who would talk good about this crime? Nobody would. Everybody would have a feeling about this case, and not a good one. So because she didn't show remorse here, I think it's a criticism that isn't warranted. You know, we in this business do these cases and we move on to other cases. Years go by. And you move on and you do other cases. You don't lose your feeling for the case you had that was terrible, but you move on. I think it's somewhat disappointing that she would be criticized for doing exactly what she is supposed to do. And it takes courage to stand up in a courtroom next to somebody accused of these crimes. A lot of courage. I've been in courtrooms where there's 50 or 60 people sitting behind me with a client next to me that I don't even like. And everybody in that courtroom hates that individual. And most of them probably hate me for sitting there with him, making an argument. But that's what our system is. That's what John Adams did when he defended the captain of the militia, the British militia, that shot the citizens of Boston, known as the Boston Massacre. He was vilified in the newspapers and by neighbors. But he says, that's my job as a lawyer to do that. He got a not guilty for that captain. And then he was hired by one of the soldiers. There were 2 soldiers he represented. And both of those were found guilty. And in those days, when you were found guilty, if you weren't a citizen of the United States, you were given the choice of either going to prison or going back to your country. So I take my lead from John Adams. I take it from other great lawyers, Clarence Darrow, who represented scores of people that committed atrocious crimes. It's the crime itself is immaterial to the representation of the person charged with that crime. In this country, if Adolf Hitler was here and charged with a crime, he would have gotten a lawyer, because that's what makes our country better than most. And that's what makes our judicial system, in my opinion, the best in the world. So I'm going to be proud to vote for this nominee, and I give her a lot of credit for having the courage to take difficult cases. Thank you.
Before we vote, I would just like to say that this nominee.
Excuse me, may I be recognized as Councilor
Councilor Kennedy?
Thank you.
Councilor Kennedy.
Councilor Jubilo and I don't always agree, but I agree with them 1,000% in this particular instance. Both Councilor Jubilo and I, as most of you know, spend a lot of time in court. Some of them have committed or accused of horrific crimes. We have an obligation to represent them to the best of our ability. We have a code of professional conduct that requires us to zealously represent our clients. If Atty McNeil had adopted the position that Councilor Devaney is advocating, she shouldn't be up for a judgeship. She should be up before the Board of Bar Overseers being disciplined, because we're obligated to represent everybody to the best of our ability. And that's what she did. Now, I want to set the record straight on one thing. People keep talking about a 3 to 6 year sentence. That was the original recommendation. After reviewing the guidelines and determining that the appropriate guideline was 5 to 7, Attorney McNeil amended her recommendation and recommended 5 to 7 that was adopted by Judge Dressler. Nobody is saying that this crime wasn't horrific. It was committed by a woman who had a history of mental illness going back to the time she was 12 years old, which was a significant mitigating factor in terms of determining what was an appropriate sentence. Attorney McNeil did exactly what she was supposed to do. She should not be criticized for it. She should be commended for it. Thank you.
We have a motion and a second. We may commence the roll call.
I had one more comment
We
about
have a motion and a second, and we may commence the roll call.
Councilor Jubinville?
Yes.
Councilor Devaney?
No.
Councilor Ioneller?
Yes.
Councilor Duff?
Yes.
Councilor Kennedy?
Yes.
Councilor Hurley?
I concur with what Councilor Kennedy and Councilor Jubinville said 100%. And Councilor Devaney is absolutely wrong. My vote is yes.
Burr?
I concur with Councilor Hurley. I'm a yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your comments today, for your discussion. I appreciate that. I know you have a hearing underway. That concludes our business today.
We're going to take, as far as the hearing is concerned, it's now 12:37. We will come back into session at 1 o'clock. Thank you.